I am just really excited to see democracy in action. This is absolutely marvelous turnout. Thank you so much for coming. I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight, and there are some other seats up here. If you get tired of standing, you can, wend your way up front. I would like to thank the City of Manitowoc and Mayor Justin Nichols for letting us use the facilities this evening. Can you hear me? Because this mic doesn't really work very well.
I can.
You can? Okay. Okay. They're getting a new sound system, but they're just taking bids now, so it'll be a while before we get it. I am Connie Hendries from the League of Women Voters, and the League of Women Voters is sponsoring this event tonight.
How about if you move down? Yeah, take another chair.
There are still some seats up here if anyone would like to sit. I would like to thank all the League of Women Voters members who helped with tonight's event. It's really wonderful to see how the word did actually get out. So that's good news. We have to have a brief word from our sponsor, which I'm sure you've heard me use before. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse one party or one candidate over another. Our mission is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. League membership is open to all citizens, male and female, of voting age. I would like to make one other brief announcement that the League of Women Voters is also sponsoring a Great Decisions series in conjunction with the library and other community organizations, which is a series of 8 foreign policy seminars starting next week, Monday at 6 o'clock at the library. And next week is Elise Cohen, and the topic is the waning of Pax Americana. Sounds interesting. And now something that I usually remember to do myself when I remind other people, please turn yourself, everybody's leaning over, yes, please turn yourself over. You knew what I was going to say. Restrooms are out that door to the left and down the hall. There are candidate campaign materials outside in the hallway displayed on a table. Our format for the evening, and I would like to thank the Herald Times for coming also, and the Valley Journal is represented for the media tonight. Each candidate will give an opening statement of no more than a minute and a half and will respond to written questions from the audience. So, what I would like to ask you now is if you haven't turned in your questions, this would be a great opportunity to do so. Just run on up and hand me your questions. I have a few, some, but here comes another one right now. We ask that each candidate will give an opening statement of no more than a minute and a half and will respond to written questions from the audience. So we ask that candidates keep their responses to questions under a minute and a half. We will have a timekeeper, Julie Grindy. Julie is right there in plain sight. Please keep your eye on Julie.
A little humor, kids.
That's her humor.
This is your humor.
That was intentional. Got it.
Julie keeps us all on track, and if I see her waving a red flag and the person isn't stopping talking, I'm going to have to break in, and it could get ugly. So keep your eye on Julie. If you have any more index cards that you picked up, just bring them on up any old time. And following the candidates' question and answer period, they will be able to give 1.5-minute closing statements. And after that, the audience will have the chance to mingle with the candidates over some refreshments in the back of the room. As you can see, it's being videoed this evening, and we no longer have Comcast who can telecast it for us, but we do have a website. It's LWV-Manitowoc.org. That's League of Women Voters Manitowoc.org, and it can be found uploaded to the website after this weekend, by next week. It will be uploaded, and click on Hot Topics. It will be, of course, under Hot Topics. Now I would like to introduce our candidates for the evening. They are running for Manitowoc County Circuit Court, Branch 2. And from the left, we have John Bilka, Geraldine Dietz, Patricia Kappa, Eric Pangborn, and Ralph Sigelski. Attorneys, one and all. And now I would like to ask the candidates to start with their opening statements, their introductions of a minute and a half. So we'll start with, name starts with B, you're first of the list, Mr. Bilka.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on, and I really appreciate everyone who's come here. It's great to have a big turnout, and I'm really thankful for all the other candidates who have thrown their hat in this race. Having so many candidates running for judge really brings a lot of attention to the race, and I think it's very important that the community gets involved in these things and that the community knows who their judges are and really vote in these things and participate, because judges have so much impact on so many people's lives. They have direct impact on thousands of people. There are hundreds of misdemeanor cases and felony cases that come through the court every year, hundreds of civil cases, and these are cases where judges have huge impacts on people's property, their lives, their freedom, the safety of the community. I was raised in Manitowoc. I've been a lawyer here for 7.5 years. I primarily practice family law and criminal law. I'm the guardian ad litem in Branch 2. That means I represent the best interests of children and vulnerable adults in various proceedings involving them, and I'm running because I think we need to look forward in our sentencing of criminal defendants. That's the main reason I'm running. There's a trend nationally towards trying to do things that reduce recidivism the way that we've been doing things up to this point over the last 20-30 years, with increasingly long sentences for nonviolent offenders out of proportion to other violent crimes is not reducing recidivism. Thank you.
That's complete.
Keep an eye on Julie. She's the one with the yellow card and the red cards. Ms. Dietz.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here tonight. Thank you, everyone. I'm running for 3 basic reasons. Number 1, Manitowoc is home. I care very deeply about this community where I've chosen to live, own a home, and raise my family. Number 2, we've got some issues. I think everybody here understands we've got some issues that we need to overcome. And I think that my 3rd reason, my breadth of experience with the law, makes me uniquely suited to help try to address some of those issues. Obviously, no judge alone can correct the problems of Manitowoc County. No branch of government alone can correct the problems. But if we have a judge who has the experience and the understanding to listen to the other community partners, to everyone else trying to address these issues together, I think a judge needs to be a leader. Now, speaking to my experience, we have a lot in common here at this table. I too am a guardian ad litem. I'm Branch 3's guardian ad litem. We have another former contract guardian ad litem. 4 of us are supplemental court commissioners. I think 4 of us have done criminal defense work. We all do family work. I'm the only one here who has also been a criminal prosecutor. I am a Department of Justice expert speaker. I've spoken for the Department of Corrections in the Prison Rape Elimination Act. I'm a community volunteer. I care very much, and I have the experience to back it to try to make Manitowoc the great place we know it can be.
Thank you. And could you please make sure you speak directly into the microphone?
I guess I said
the
thank
sound
you.
system is in need of replacement, so.
Try to pull it back. Is that better? Thank you.
Do you want to say it on?
Wait.
Do you want me to repeat that? I can do it better.
Could you hear anything she said?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Then you don't have to.
Thank you.
Ms. Kappa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Judge Dwayne and I were trying to recall how last year's event went, and it wasn't quite this full of a room. So we do appreciate that. I'm glad everyone's here. Many of you, though, do know my message and who I am. I'll do a nice little introduction, though. I'm Circuit Court Commissioner, Register and Probate, and I've had that title for over 20 years. When The new judge is sworn in on August 1st. Our most experienced judge will only have 5 years. So I do think that that is one of the reasons my experience, my judicial experience, does make me unique in this role. I have been there through the other judges. I know some of the things that we've tried that have worked but have gone to the wayside. I know some of the things we've neglected to try but probably should have. And there are things that I want to try that I've heard about from other counties. If you've seen my paperwork, my handouts, I have 4 things. Innovation, that's what I mean by it. We've covered experience, community focus. Like everyone else at the table, I am a volunteer, and I will be fair, honest, and impartial. Those are my principles, and thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Pankburn.
Thank you. I could certainly sit up here and tell all of you about my background and experience, such as the fact that I've been the municipal judge in Two Rivers and Michigan for several years, have in my legal career presided over 5,000 cases in that capacity. Sit up here and tell you I've handled over 1,800 criminal cases, hundreds of civil and family law cases. I even teach family law for the last several years out at Lakeshore Technical College. But you can learn all of that by reading my webpage. Want to learn about my background? Go there. What I hope you understand when you leave here tonight is that it takes a particular kind of person to be a great circuit court judge. It takes a person who has the common sense, intelligence, experience to understand the facts and the laws of the cases that come before the court and reach the correct decision in those cases. It takes a person with the correct temperament and compassion to treat all of the people who come to court with the dignity and respect that they deserve. When you decide who you want to vote for, take a look at who other people in our community say should be the next judge. Take a look at who the circuit court judges think it should be, such as Bob DeWayne, who's in the back of the room and has endorsed my candidacy, such as other attorneys, such as police officers, folks in your own community. When they go to court and they say, you know, for their own case, their spouse's case, their kid's case, their brother, their sister, their friend, who do they want the judge to be? Who do they think is going to give them a fair and good hearing? And those people think that's me, and I think it is as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sigelski.
Thank you. I'm going to just open up by saying that those are 4 very good people over here, hardworking, smart people. All of us, if I may include myself in there, are hardworking, I think intelligent people. I think all of us will try to be impartial, honest, try to work hard, and that's, I think, one of the most important things here. I can't single anybody out and say, whatever you do, don't vote for so-and-so. I'm not going to do that here. But these are good people. As for me, what do I bring to the table? 26 years as a practicing lawyer in courts, over 1,800 criminal cases, over 4,000 cases overall. I had over 40 jury trials, which is kind of like the final exam that a judge has to handle. There's basically, from what I understand, 2 categories of things that occur in a courtroom. Number one, it's kind of an assembly line. You get a lot of people, 1,000 cases or whatever per year each judge handles. Sometimes you have to deal with them very, very quickly. You have to give them the correct attention. Other times you have the big jury trials. In the last 12 months, I've had 4.5 days spent in jury trials. It's kind of unusual. Usually I don't have quite that many. I've had 6 homicide trials, and I've handled dozens of homicide cases. Those are the big cases. As far as family law, I've had over 400 divorces. I've had over 400 civil trials. I don't know if anybody else up here has handled, for example, a bunch of summary judgment motions or any of those types of things. I have. I've been in town for 26 years. I've owned a home for 26 years. I've been volunteering all over the community in various capacities over that time because I think people trusted my judgment. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now start with the question.
Yes. Can I still give you a question?
Sure, any old time. Come on down. Our first question will start with Ms. Dietz. If elected, what do you foresee as the biggest challenge you will face, and how will you handle it?
It's always hard to predict what will face any judge, because there's no way to predict what crimes will be committed, what family issue will come up, what civil case will be filed. I think starting out, the biggest challenge for any judge is a learning curve. It doesn't matter how many cases we've each handled. There's always something new that occurs. I think we all have to resist the temptation to prejudge anything. We can't sit here and tell you that this kind of case will result in this kind of sentence. That would be patently unfair and unethical. We all need to set aside emotion, be very confident in the law, learn the facts as they are proven, apply those facts fairly to the law, and come to a just decision. That's, I'm sure, certainly far easier said than done, but that is really paramount to what it means to be a circuit court judge. I think it's also probably the largest challenge any judge reaches.
Thank you. Ms. Kappa?
Same question?
Same question.
Okay.
Oh yeah, everybody's going to get 5 chances to answer every question.
Just wanted to make sure
By the
it's the
time
way you
you're number
addressed it.
5, you may just say me too.
The challenge for me would be perhaps the new areas. I've done a lot in the various areas that the court commissioners do work. I haven't done a lot of the big trials. However, I've sat in on the big trials. I have sat in on jury trials, and in many ways I do believe that I understand the judicial role as opposed to the attorney role in those types of hearings. Trying to keep saying challenges, I can tell you I can do well. What's going to be hard? It's hard to know for the very reasons Ms. Dietz said. You can't predict what's going to happen. I do know, though, that judges in Manitowoc County have far more cases than people realize, that we are ranked out as having a need for 5 judges plus, and even with the court commissioners, we don't cover that. So always remaining efficient, getting the cases done, recognizing the individual's needs to get their case done rather than our need to have our calendar organized is one of the things I'm going to be focusing on.
Thank you. Mr. Painter?
I think the largest challenge facing the judges in our community today, all 3 branches, whoever gets elected, is going to be the proper handling of the criminal cases. The criminal cases make up probably 70 to 80% of the court's calendar. The criminal cases, I think, are the cases that have the largest impact on the safety and well-being of the people here in our community, just because of the nature of the crimes that are being committed. Crimes are going up in Manitowoc County. If you look at the number of cases that have been filed over the past 4 or 5 years since Jacqueline Labrie has been here as our district attorney, the number of criminal cases that have been filed every year has gone up. The amount of those cases that deal with drug addiction is substantial. And that is really the biggest problem right now in our community, in our circuit courts, is how to handle these individuals who have committed crimes, who have serious drug addictions, who need help. And we need, I think, what we've been doing has not been working. I mean, the amount of people who are getting incarcerated in this country is substantial. And we need new and innovative approaches, such as the drug court that we've just started here in Manitowoc County, which I understand is doing quite well for the individuals who are in it, including a few of my clients, one of whom I just ran into last week, who's doing great and would probably be in prison if not for that program. And that's what I think is the biggest issue facing our courts today, is the proper handling of these cases so we can keep our community safe and get these people the help that they need.
Thank you. Mr. Sigalski?
Thank you. Twofold. I have been running my own law firm for 18 years. If I become judge, I'm suddenly part of a government agency, essentially, and trying to work within a bureaucracy. And I find that will probably be a challenge for me, because I'm used to basically making decisions, and hopefully the employees carry them out and things occur in a certain way. So I think that will probably be at a personal level, and on a day-to-day level, perhaps my biggest challenge. I will have to echo, as far as what the county is requiring and what the job entails, with what Eric has just said. The drug problem is out of control. And I ask people this question: what would you rather have? Your child getting punched in the face, or your child getting addicted to a horrible substance? Personally, I take the punch in the face, because that will heal up after a while. The addiction problems that we see are unbelievable, because what happens is you take a very good person, hopefully a very hardworking person, and a loving family, and turn them into basically a drug-addicted monster in some respects. And the drug court is a wonderful thing. I like the second phase of the drug court that's going into effect, which is taking first offenders, people who are first getting involved in the drug world, and curtailing them right away. It was about And that was handled extremely well for a young lady who was with the wrong crowd for a while, got picked up with a possession charge, and now she's living a wonderful life. I'll just leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bilka.
I'm going to dovetail off of what Mr. Pangburn said. And the drug court program, a lot of praise for that. It is a great program, but judges have very limited resources. That's one of them. But the drug court program that we have has, I believe, 9 people in it at the moment. There's a capacity for 12. That's a very small number of people compared to how many cases are filed. And the majority of criminal cases, I think it'd be fair to say the majority, are there because of people with drug addiction, either selling drugs, having drugs, or doing something in order to get drugs. And I think the biggest challenge is, what do you do with the person who, would be that person number 10 who maybe misses that cusp of the treatment resource that you have, where that's a very well-funded, well-staffed program, but then if you're off of that cliff, there's very little there for somebody. If they go on probation, maybe they don't get into treatment for months, and that's because they're on a waiting list. How do you treat that person? Do you just, do you put an arbitrary length of jail? There has to be some punishment for crime, obviously. There has to be some deterrent. But if you take someone out of the community and you take everything that they have away from them, then they're potentially more likely to commit a crime, and you are endangering the community by by doing something that maybe people think makes them feel safer. So that's a very tough balancing act, and you have to be very careful with what you do, and that's a big challenge.
Thank you. I have several questions here about drug court, and some of you have kind of answered it, and some of you didn't. So I think we'll just briefly go around and have people say how they feel about drug court, and then we'll put that one to rest. Okay? We'll start with Ms. Cotta.
It's not fair to Ms. Dietz to do that. But my comment was going to be that I have, while not participating in the drug court team because I am a commissioner, not one of the judges, I was instrumental, or feel I was, in setting the road to getting that drug court. I participated in some of the early planning. I participated in creating the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, without which I don't think we would have been able to proceed with the grants that allowed us to get the drug court. It's not fair to the others that I know some things that they apparently aren't. We've had a few misstatements already, and it's just simply because I've been part of it. The program that's being started with first offenders, that's the diversion program. That's different than phase 2 of the drug court. There is a drug court actually has 4 or 5 different phases. All of the participants will have to move through those phases to graduate. It's going to be more than 12 people as we go along. The grant had very strict requirements to get us started, to make sure we knew what we were doing in the beginning. We know what we're doing. At least we've shown that we have. These services are also available to other people. You can let your clients know that, John. They'll appreciate hearing that. And with that, I'm obviously in favor of drug court.
Thank you. Mr. Pangburn, anything you want to add to your previous statement?
Yes. First, I'd like to say there are certainly individuals who are accused of crimes or guilty of crimes who drug court is not right for. There are absolutely individuals who should be in jail or prison, who should be removed from our community to make us safer. But there are a large number of individuals who would benefit from these programs. Several years ago, when Brown County started their drug court program, and they now have 4 or 5 treatment courts in Brown County because we've been going so well, I had the first individual who was entered into the drug court program. And I remember Judge Zeinwalder lecturing him about how difficult it was going to be and how much scrutiny he was going to be under, because he was the first person in that program, and there were a lot of people in Brown County who didn't want that program. And now they have 4 or 5 courts. These programs work. The other thing that's interesting to note is if you look at the cost to put an individual in prison, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Women cost a little more, they're closer to the $40,000. Men are closer to the $30,000. I met with Judge Rohr yesterday, who administers the drug court program, or is the judge for that program, and he didn't have the exact numbers, but he was able to tell me that it costs less per put someone in the drug court. So we are able to use the drug court to get better results with less money. I don't know why you would not support a program that does that.
Thank you. Mr. Sigelski, anything you'd like to add?
Eric and I have been in the same office for 13 years, so he kind of leads me into what I'm going to say a little bit. Put another dollar figure on it. We want a $12 million addition to the jail. When that jail was built about 27 years ago, we were able to put state inmates into that jail, which the state paid to put them in there. Now we're absolutely full. And we have a lot of people out on the ankle bracelet as well. A lot of those people really desperately do not want to end up back there, but those addictions are so powerful that that's what happens. I don't think we want people necessarily in the drug court who don't feel as though they have a problem. There's plenty of those that, you know, well, I don't really have a problem, I'm going to go right back into it. But I can guarantee you there are people in this very room who had drug problems, are over them because of some good treatment, some good soul searching, and I admire them greatly. And I think that the drug court is a wonderful way to do that, because if you get that person in the black robe sitting up there on that bench also providing that kind of support and maybe that hammer over their head, that can be very, very valuable. Call me crazy, but perhaps, you know, the judge is getting a little bit more involved, like, you know, Marco Manor sticking their head into an AA meeting from time to time. Maybe that would be helpful too. Maybe an expansion of the whole drug court idea. And Pat said there is a diversion program. I didn't mean to say it's another phase. I meant that there's another phase in the more generic sense of what else we're putting into place. That's kind of what I meant. I know there's various phases of succeeding in the actual drug court. But getting, I think, those first offenders early is a very important part of it. Thank you.
Mr. Gilmer.
Thank you. Drug court is expanding its capacity. I didn't mean to say maximum capacity will be 12 in the end. That's what we're working up to at this point under what's funded. But we still have the problem of what happens beyond that. And even when we're up to, let's say, 30 people, hopefully we can get to that point. You know, what do you do beyond that? And drug court, nobody here is going to say drug court's a bad program. It's common sense. It's great. You know, it's such a good idea, and people, you know, their lives really changed. And it was just wonderful. You know, how many people? I mean, the drug courtroom is about as packed as this room nowadays. When people, you know, are there and they see all the support from the community, and that's so helpful. Turns people's lives around, but that's not the be-all and the end-all. You know, if that's, you know, if you're looking at cases like, you know, either it's drug court or it's, I guess, you know, very, I guess, disproportionate sentencing in a way, that is not helping the problem. You know, we still have to look at the people who aren't going into drug court and treat those cases very carefully and seriously, and consider the, you know, the long-term impact of whatever sentences are given. So drug court is great. It's not right for everybody. Not everybody would succeed in that program. You know, but you know, when it's what we have, we still have to deal with the other cases that can't be dealt with that limited resource.
Thank you. Ms. Deek.
Yes, what they said. If anyone here hasn't had the opportunity to sit in on drug court, I strongly advise it. I don't know, I speak for a living, and I don't know that I have the words to describe what it is like to sit there and experience what is going on, to watch these participants who have devoted, this is it, this is their last hope, this is their chance for treatment, this is their chance for success, for a healthy life, and to see the community support, to see the jury box full of all the court partners. We've got people from all the different branches of the courtroom, of the courthouse, treatment providers, defense attorneys, the clerk of courts. We've got a lot of people really invested. This program is spectacular, but the fact remains that it is a drop in the bucket and a lot more work needs to be done. But I think that's kind of what I was alluding to from the outset. We need this kind of innovation and this kind of cooperation to successfully address a scourge like the opioid addiction. We also need to not lose sight of the fact that we still have other problems in Manitowoc. The drug addiction, I think, can overshadow some of the other things that are going on. Treatment courts are not just limited to drug courts. There are plenty of opportunities to have other legal innovations that require leadership from the bench, that maybe we can address some of the other issues that Manitowoc County has to face on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What personal qualities would you bring to the bench that make you uniquely qualified to be a judge? Let's start with Mr. Panger.
I really think, I know we're all experienced, but I really think my experience is the quality that's really going to help me as a circuit court judge. As I've indicated previously, I have been the municipal judge in Rivers and Michigan for the last 4 years. I was proud to have been elected to that position. And for those of you who have not had the pleasure of being in municipal court, that's great. But it's very similar to the criminal cases that you see in the circuit court. That is, these are things like, disorderly conduct charges, battery charges, lying to the police, drunk driving, stealing, trespassing, breaking people's property. So they're the same kind of cases that come to circuit court. Not the more serious cases like the sex assaults, the drug dealing, the homicides, but a lot of the same cases that you can charge in criminal court are oftentimes instead charged in municipal court. And I've had the experience to have people come to court, file motions to say, hey, my rights have been violated. I shouldn't have been pulled over. I shouldn't have been searched. So I have handled those motions and I have made those decisions on whether those activities were appropriate. I have sat on trials where, unlike the circuit court judge in a criminal case, municipal court, I am the fact finder, I am the jury, I do the sentencing, I do it all. So I have substantial experience. I'm trying cases almost every month in my court, and I've handled over 5,000 cases already in my career in a legal capacity, or judicial, capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sigelski.
Hard work, putting in the long hours. If you want to check out my parking lot sometime, my car is there usually before 8 a.m. It's usually there at 12:30 over the noon hour, and I'm usually still there after 5 o'clock. I'm not goofing off while I'm there, I'm working hard. Because you have to focus sometimes on particular cases, write a brief. I've written over 300 appellate briefs, which means that you have to really look very carefully at the issues and dig deeply to figure out what the answers are. I can do that. I've been a business owner, as I've said before. I think that brings a perspective that is unique. I've got the ability to also jump from one thing to the other. You have to. I've seen judges. You got the criminal case, then you got the family court issue, then you're doing a warrant, and then you're dealing with a civil case, an injunction, maybe a mental commitment comes in, especially on intake month. I think being able to jump from one to the other is very valuable, and some people have a hard time with that. I can handle that sort of thing. And finally, something that a trial lawyer is very good at doing, which is thinking on your feet. You're not really doing that when you're sitting up there in the bench. You're thinking on another part of your body. But that particular ability to hear, to make a decision, to deal with an objection, to even say the right thing at a time of sentencing. I've had the pleasure of working in front of some extremely good judges, and one of them was Judge Hazelwood, who really took time to explain sentences to people and why he's doing things. He would take 45 minutes in a juvenile case to try to get that young person back on track. That's the sort of thing that you have to stop and do because you've got everything else going on in your life appropriately and everything else in chambers going appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bilka.
I think my best quality is that I don't look at things in black and white, and I would really look to get to the truth of matters, and I would be very fair. I think people who have dealt with me would say that I'm fair, I listen, that I don't just come down and make a decision and decide, well, this is right, that's right, and then block everything else out. I listen to everything that's presented to me, and then I come to my conclusion. I'm the youngest person in the race. I think that's not a bad thing. I think that youth can give someone a certain perspective, maybe a personal perspective on what they want to see in the community going forward, and a real drive to try to make things better, and a real care for the community. Not that, don't get me wrong, everybody here cares about the community, but I think in a way that, that's an advantage, and it gives you a certain bit of drive. I've handled a lot of trials myself. I don't know, court trials, jury trials, probably about 10 court trials, a lot, various types of cases. I like trials. I would like to handle trials. I think I'd be a very good trial judge with my experience there. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Deeds.
Thank you. I think the experience that I bring that's most applicable to the role of circuit court judge is the use of discretion. I spent 9 years as a criminal prosecutor, and there's a great deal of discretion required to do that job appropriately. Whether to charge somebody with an offense, what to charge, whether it should be a municipal violation, whether it should be a misdemeanor or a felony. As assistant district attorney and as district attorney, I had to make those calls minute after minute, day after day, for the full 9 years. I also served as temporary court commissioner after Judge Rohr was elected to the bench to deal with the conflicts of interest in all the criminal cases for 6 months. So for those 6 months, I did all of the initial appearances, but I also heard all of the preliminary hearings and had to use that discretion to determine whether the evidence was sufficient to carry on with the prosecution. I think that experience has given me a good backdrop to apply what happens in that courtroom. I also think I have a good demeanor. I have a long fuse. I'm pretty unflappable. I don't get excited very often. I don't get angry very often. But when pushed, I also have a backbone. And I think having the varied experiences in my career have really set me up to have the right kind of temperament to control a courtroom and make it a productive place for people to litigate.
Thank you. Ms. Compton.
I would think I share a number of those qualities with people. Was hearing just today, though, that one of the things litigants have liked about how I do small claims, which may not be the most important thing I do, but for the litigants that are there, it is. And I don't think a week goes by that I don't say it's the hardest thing I did all week. There is something about those litigated emotional cases. To the litigants, everything's emotional, and most of the time there's no attorneys in the small claims. I am able to keep order in those rooms. I'm able to keep the parties being respectful, and if they're not, I give very no-nonsense. But I also have compassion. We've recently heard comments about dealing with the youth. It's hard when you know what the young person's been accused of in the delinquency cases to not just think we should keep them locked up somewhere. But having been a parent of teenagers, working with early teens on a weekly basis because of the Girl Scouts and other activities, I know what those kids are thinking. And I've been able to be somewhat compassionate and help them understand what we are doing in that courtroom.
Thank you. Could you speak about your view of the role of CASA in child protection cases? CASA is Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children. Can we start with Mr. Sigelski?
Sure. The program that I understand it to be, I have been deeply involved in it, but the idea that there is an actual person out there keeping an eye on that child above and beyond the social worker, above and beyond the guardian ad litem, the courts, and other people involved. There's actually a community member that comes in, as I understand it, and really is an advocate for that child, in addition to saying, for example, well, he or she is in a decent home and that type of thing. I gotta say, I haven't really been deeply involved in that. I haven't really done a lot of juvenile work in the last 4 or 5 years. It just hasn't been where my practice took me. I used to do a lot of it, however. I know CASA advocates here in town, and they do a nice job. They actually go that extra mile above and beyond what, for example, a guardian ad litem can really spend doing. Really getting to know the child. What is that kid involved in? What is that child's special needs? Is that child a good fit with the foster parent? Are the real parents stepping up and doing what has to be done? CASA is a good program. It's volunteer-based, so therefore, obviously, it doesn't cost a ton of money, which is a wonderful thing, given the budgets that we're always constantly dealing with. So I'm very much in favor of it. And I hope it continues, and I hope we have great volunteers to continue working that program.
Thank you. Mr. Bilka.
I would echo what Mr. Sigelski said. They're a great program. They're an extra set of eyes, an extra person who's spending some time with the child and enriching that child's life. Sometimes CASA volunteers see things that other people who are working with the child miss just because of the way, the time that they spend with the whole family and seeing their environment. And they write reports and get them to the judges, get them to the other parties in the case, and that's very helpful. So I think CASA is a great program, and I hope that hope we keep it up because the kids need it.
Thank you. Ms. Deeds.
Yes, it's a privilege to get to work with CASA volunteers all the time in my work as a guardian ad litem. I'm also very excited because I'm very active with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I just finished my 3rd term as president of our local Big Brothers Big Sisters Board of Directors, which is relevant because I understand in Green Bay there's a program where CASA volunteers become Big Brother Big Sister mentors after the conclusion of the case. and that's a program I'm working to try to bring to Manitowoc County. I think it's extraordinary that I think it is a testament to the work that the volunteers do, that there is value to these children, to having that mentor involved in their lives. Their advocate become a mentor and continue on even past the Child in Need of Protection Services court process. I'm a big fan of CASA. I think that they supplement the work that we do as guardian ad litem very nicely. I think it makes a really good team, which is very necessary when we're dealing with these vulnerable children.
Thank you. Ms. Conklin.
There's really not much left to say about what CASA is. And I do approve of the program. I was guardian ad litem before we had them in Manitowoc County, and I can tell you from what I understand about their work, it has made a very big positive difference. And I would encourage anyone to become involved. I would encourage the courts to use the volunteers more, if more were available. Everyone has time limits, of course. But I am in favor of the program. I would encourage their use.
Thank you. Mr. Pangburn, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, you can't possibly say anything bad about the CASA workers. It's a fantastic program. You have, when you have a person who's in a child in need of protection and services case, young people who are either being neglected or abused, or who have parents who have drug problems, who are being removed from their home. You have folks like John and Geraldine who conduct investigations as contract guardian ad litems and make recommendations to the court about what's in the best interest of those children, what the placement should be, what conditions the parents should follow, what rehabilitative needs should be addressed. The CASA worker has a completely different role. They're there almost a lot like Big Brother, Big Sister. They're there with that child, doing things with that child, showing them that life doesn't have to be as bad as it is at that moment. And then they are able, as Mr. Cegelski said, to observe that person where they are and tell the court how they're doing. And the guardian ad litems can't do that, not to that extent. These two have their own careers besides being contract guardian ad litem. They have plenty of GAL cases and plenty of other cases, and so does Jim Skyberg, who's our other contract guardian ad litem. That CASA worker really has the time to devote to each individual child. And I agree with Patty completely. If people have, we need more volunteers, and if people have the time in their life to volunteer, being a CASA worker is a great thing. I believe it's still administered by Lakeshore CAP, so if you want to volunteer, head on down there and they'll sign you up gladly.
And your mom works there?
She does. She does work there, yes.
Thank you for that commercial announcement. What is your position on victims' rights, say in a sexual assault situation? Mr. Bilton.
I think victims' rights are very important. Victims have the rights to be in court, number one, in all proceedings, to be notified of proceedings. Victims also have the right to have input on what should happen in cases. And sexual assault is mentioned. That's one of the worst things that somebody can do to a person. And absolutely, the victim needs to be involved in that process. And it's, the way that district attorneys' offices handle it is they, try to keep, let the victim participate to the extent that the victim wants. If they don't have to show up at hearings, they can communicate with the prosecutor, they can submit things in writing. Obviously, if there's a trial, the victim might have to testify. But I think it's important that they're involved in the process and have some input. And as far as victims' rights goes, not a lot of people know about the Victims' Rights Compensation Fund. I think that's something that people need to be more aware of so that they can get some restitution, because a lot of people who, hurt people and cause them some financial harm, they can't be recovered from. They don't have any money themselves, and I don't think that program is very well advertised. And I would educate people about that.
Thank you. Ms. Deeb.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked. This is an area of very special concern to me and something that I've really devoted a lot of time and attention to in my career. The Wisconsin Constitution guarantees certain rights to victims of crime, and it's absolutely, completely important that every member of the court process recognize and uphold those rights for crime victims. It's easy to just give lip service to it, but it truly matters that people who have been wronged are not wronged again by the process. And I think we have a pretty sad history of that, not just in the state of Wisconsin, but around the nation. And more as time has gone on, we recognize that crime victims need to be active participants in the process, and their voices need to be heard. Part of what I do on the side is speak for the Department of Justice on trauma-informed victim interviewing. As for the research is telling us what happens to a person's brain when they are the victim of a crime, when some traumatic event happens. And it's really, it's groundbreaking, it's very exciting to learn about this, but it's also really important that that be part of our court process. I believe I do well in this area. I did win an award in 2010 for victim advocacy, which I don't like to brag. But I can't say enough about how important I think actually truly involving a crime victim in the process to the extent that they feel able, and giving them the options and the choices available to them and how they proceed. It's vitally important to a healthy engagement with the court process and making sure the person is made whole and not victimized again.
Thank you. Ms. Coppin.
Of course, victim rights are important. During the last few years, we have actually taken a look at the process that both the human services workers use when they do the informing in the juvenile cases and what the DA's office is doing in their cases. I sat on those committees even though I'm not directly involved in providing any of those notices, because we had noticed that certain things were and weren't happening down in the initial hearings that I hold. We weren't always checking if there were victims in the hallway. We weren't acknowledging them. Those things have changed. I've heard from the workers involved in those juvenile cases where that is a factor, that some of those cases have then had victims who've turned around and actually helped in the rehabilitation of the youth. So victims' rights and providing more than just lip service is very important and cathartic for everyone involved.
Thank you. Mr. Hangburn.
I have to echo the comments of those who came before me. You cannot possibly overstate the importance of providing all of the rights to victims that they deserve under the Constitution and under the statutes that have been written. I have handled over 1,800 criminal cases, and I can probably count on my two hands the number of times a victim has actually showed up at a sentencing hearing and told the judge what he or she thinks the sentence should be. And all the time, the judge will ask the prosecutor, it's kind of perfunctory, and I think to some extent, unfortunately, it may be lip service, but the question, have victim rights been complied with? Yes. Okay, let's move on. I don't understand why they don't show up, right? There's a substantial impact in our community when crimes are committed, but there's no greater impact on anybody than the person who is the victim of that crime. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that person understands that they absolutely have the right to come to court, face the person who victimized them, and tell the judge what they think should happen to that person. We need to make sure they understand that that is their right. We need to make sure they understand that the courthouse is a safe place where they can come and express those opinions to the court. I don't know why it's not happening more, and certainly we need to find some way to get those people into the courthouse. As a judge, I certainly would want to know what the victim thinks should happen. And oftentimes the judges have no idea because they just don't show up. So we need to make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Sigelski.
Eric, for once I have a slight disagreement with you. I have seen quite a few cases where victims either showed up or put in writing what they felt was an appropriate punishment for the perpetrator of the crime. It's maybe because I've handled certain types of cases: homicides, sexual assault, and property crimes. For example, embezzlement or theft. I see quite a few victims wanting to have their say in court. I remember back in the 1990s, before we had victims' rights and the types of laws that have been in effect. It's under Chapter 950 of the statutes. And I remember somebody who was in our DA's office, not there anymore, but somebody who was there bemoaning the fact that now he had to put up with victims and what they had to say. I couldn't believe it. Now, 20-some years later, having victims have a say in it is very, very important, and I think every single judge takes that seriously. Every single judge listens carefully to what the victims want, and if that judge tends to disagree with what the victim wants, that judge is explaining it very carefully why that is happening. I have seen many victims in court, on the big cases especially. One of my first civil cases when I started my own law firm was actually going after a young man who sexually assaulted a young lady, and that was a civil case I brought, unfortunately because victims' rights laws really weren't as powerful then. And the same prosecutor said, well, why can't she just get over it? That is not the attitude we have nowadays, thankfully. And I'm glad that our judges do take the victims' rights law seriously, and that Chapter 950 is a part of our law.
Thank you. Are we starting over again with Mr. Bilger?
Ms. Dees.
I've lost my...
I think it's Gerald.
It's Gerald.
Every night.
If you need me to go twice first.
That Mr. Bilger.
You're calling me on it, okay. No,
But he didn't, did you get to answer?
I answered the last
You
one
did.
first.
Thank you. Somebody needs to keep me on track. Despite reduction in crime over the last decade, the number of people incarcerated continues to grow at a huge expense to taxpayers. What can be done?
That's a really good question. I think that is the... am I going first?
Yes. Yes.
Jump right in. Thank you. I'll dive into the answer. I think that's the question that courts are asking themselves all over the country, but especially in Wisconsin, where we have really extremely high and growing incarceration rates. The issue, I think, is that we have left judges too few alternatives. We've got probation as an alternative to incarceration, but we also have too few probation agents. We have too few treatment programs to put probationers in. We have too little oversight. We could fine people. Sometimes that is absolutely the appropriate sentence, but a lot of times it's not. I think we are leaving too few options, and that leads to why we need some innovation in the courts, and we need to think critically about who needs to be incarcerated for longer periods, and who could we reduce recidivism and keep the community safe without lengthy incarceration terms. I think that part of the issue is how the laws are written. We have more and more mandatory minimum sentences, which removes discretion from the judges. We have also a better understanding, though, of how serious some crimes are. To kind of dovetail on what Mr. Sabelski was talking about, we have a better understanding now of the severity of some offenses that we didn't necessarily recognize in the past. So it's not all bad, but I do think having judges who think critically about the situation, about the community, and what the community needs is really important, so we don't mindlessly lock up people unnecessarily.
Thank you. Ms. Kaplan.
Judges don't have a lot of options. That's a very true statement. And part about being innovative, it isn't just case processing, it's trying to help find those, make sure we're using all the options, challenge the other members of the team. Judges don't just pull sentences out of a hat. As I understand this, there's something called a sentencing report, and the public never knows what's in those because those are confidential, but the Department of Corrections prepares this, presents it to the judge. We have the DA that argues the sentence. We have the defense counsel that argues for a different sentence. You have to use the common sense. You have to use the good of the community and make the choices that best suit this individual. If there are more tools to help you decide who needs to be incarcerated and who is safe back in the community, we have to make sure we're using all of those options. The statistics do show that if you give more serious consequences and resources and apply it to someone who's not a risk, you're wasting your money and you're making that person into a risk. And that's what I think we have to avoid.
Thank you. Mr. Bainbridge.
I think there's really two issues at work here, and both have probably been touched on already. The first, of course, is that we do need more options in sentencing individuals than simply saying you go to prison, you go to jail. Those are your options. And we're working on that. We do have the drug court, and I understand it's only 9 people right now, but the plan certainly is to expand that. If you go to Brown County and Sheboygan County, they have a veteran treatment court in each of those counties that addresses issues that are of particular concern to individuals who served in the military. Brown County has a heroin-specific drug court for not offenders, but for individuals who have that particular drug as their addiction, and they have a mental health treatment court. So there are options. The other problem is that even the options that we currently have are simply underfunded. When you put a person on probation and the judge orders an alcohol and other drug abuse assessment and tells the person, get that assessment and take whatever classes are offered, that probation officer doesn't necessarily have the time to follow up with every single person who's placed on probation to make sure that they called the drug treatment center and signed up for their assessment, and to make sure that they're going to the classes. There's just not enough resources. And the criminal justice system, the Department of Corrections, spends a lot of money, but they need to spend more. That's just the unfortunate reality, because there are not enough resources, even in the options we currently have, to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sabelski?
Well, I see three reasons. The first one was back in about the year 2000, truth in sentencing came into effect. Before that, for example, a judge could sentence an offender to, let's say, 8 years prison. But what did that really mean? They're eligible for parole in 2 years, and maybe they got out in 2.5 or 3. Truth in sentencing, they get an 8-year sentence, they got an 8-year sentence. There's very little early release going on. That's one of the issues. Now, I'm a fan of truth in sentencing. I remember what the old system was like back in the 1990s as well. I don't know if anybody else up here was practicing criminal law back then. I was. And a judge could hand out a sentence, but it looked tough. But you know what? They really weren't, because people were getting out a lot earlier. That's one reason we have people who have been sentenced in the last 10, 15 years, got a 12-year sentence, for example. They're sitting that 11th and 12th year. Another issue is just very obvious. We've talked about this many times, and probably won't be the end of it. Drugs. The drugs are much more powerful now. Those opiate crises are not there simply because the drugs are the same as they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. They are much more powerful, much more addictive. The people are therefore there's recidivism, let's put it that way. They're getting revoked. That's the third issue, because they keep on going back to that very, very powerful drug world. Again, punch my son in the face, but don't get him addicted to heroin. That's what I would prefer. I prefer either one, of course. But that, I think, is lying at the heart of it, is that the drug culture and that pull back into the drug world is putting them back behind bars. They get revoked from probation. They end up simply being locked up because that's the only thing left to do.
Thank you. Mr. Gilcom?
Judges can't help what legislators do. Judges can't create resources. Judges can't just simply wait for resources to be created before they start thinking about that problem. You know, it's a strange experience when you're sitting in court with a guy who, you know, maybe it's his second THC possession and he's being charged as a felony, and you're watching a guy who punched his pregnant girlfriend and hurt her and she had bruises, and you tell your guy, you know what? Hate to say it, man, you're going to get more time than this person. And that's just, I mean, it's wrong. You know, we've lost a sense of proportionality, and judges have discretion. That's what judges do have in deciding what they're going to send someone to. And you have to have some sense of proportion. You know, so that's, I mean, that's proportion out of whack, right? You know, one person who, you know, I mean, yeah, you know, weed's illegal, you shouldn't be possessing that, but, you know, obviously two different levels of crime here. You know, and we're putting people in prison and long terms of jail for things that, you know, are much less harmful than, I guess, the harmful acts that we should be punishing more harshly. And that's why this has gotten all out of whack. You know, and, you know, again, judges can't help that the legislators have wanted to look tough rather than actually, you know, spend the money on the right programs to reduce crime. You know, it is what it is, but you know, that's the reality, and you have to deal with what you have. You can't, if not every problem is a nail, you can't just whack it with the hammer.
Thank you. Ms. Deeds?
I answered first.
Yeah.
I can answer again.
Here's more thoughts.
There's so much to say.
What general principles or philosophies will you apply when sentencing offenders? Let's start with First County.
I am. And this would be my disadvantage. I like pointing out that everyone's got criminal experience. Our current judges, well, the two that will be remaining, were also in the DA's office. And that's the one thing I don't have, other than the fact I've worked on the various programs and participate in the bail hearings. So I get to talk to the prosecutors and the defense counsel a fair amount. I do think that to the extent the judge has the discretion, a violent crime should be sentenced more harshly than the drug possessions. I know that's not how it's set up right now, so I will be bound by what the law is. A judge, particularly a circuit court judge, has to follow the law. You're not the legislative body. You don't get to make those decisions. And if you start going outside the rules, there are councils and people that are supervising you, whether it's the voters or others within the court system. So my things that I would be looking at are the type of crime, whether there is an actual victim or if it's the society that's the victim, past history, the information we get from the DOC regarding whether this person is likely to reoffend. And that's all you can do is your best with what you've got.
Thank you. Mr. Banger.
Criminal sentencing is an area where the Supreme Court has given us quite a bit of guidance, us meaning judges, as to what the factors are that you should consider. And there's a long kind of laundry list, and you'll look down that list and you'll see things like, how serious was the crime? What is the person's character? Do they have a prior record? Do they have drug problems? Were they gainfully employed or not? Did they get honorably discharged from the military? There's all sorts of things that go into that character column, right? And then they look to a number of other factors. What is necessary to protect the community? What is the appropriate punishment? What rehabilitation does the person need? What restorative justice can we give to the victim of this case? So there is this long laundry list, and it's the job of the judge to listen to the facts of the case and to give each of those factors the weight that the judge thinks they deserve in that particular case. And every judge does things differently. I personally think the first thing you should look at is how serious is the crime, as John talked about. A person who has a marijuana joint shouldn't get a longer sentence than a person who punched their pregnant wife in the stomach. The second thing that I personally think is most important